Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to episode number 85 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by James Cavanagh today. James is the founder and neurodiversity consultant of Raw Life Health, specializing in supporting neurodivergent individuals, particularly those with ADHD and autism. With over 25 years of experience in education, mental health, and disability, James integrates evidence-based practices like CBT, ACT, and mindfulness with his unique frameworks, Rawsome and Bloom Profiler. He's currently pursuing postgraduate studies in psychology at Swinburne University, further deepening his expertise in neurodivergence. James is dedicated to bridging gaps in healthcare and education by offering pragmatic and person-centered solutions. Welcome to the show, James.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. We're both fellow members of ADPA and keen to hear both about your work and your own personal story. Could you tell us about your own experience with neurodivergence?
I was that little boy in the class that was at the back sort of playing with crafty raffia activities while the rest of the class seemingly got on with their work. There were early signs when I was at school that I had a unique way of thinking or accessing what it was I needed to learn and how I went about doing it. So it started very early on. It manifested into anxiety and a bit of misdiagnosis in the 90s around more presentation of symptom rather than it was of the causation. In my 30s, however, I started to really look at life as we're approaching that 40 to 50 mark of halfway. There's a lot of things that keep repeating that aren't really gelling. Why is it that my counterparts are doing better than I am or supposedly better than I am? So I looked to diagnosis of possibility and shifting from anxiety to something deeper. In my 30s, it came about. It was just a process of listening to my mother, a psychologist in private practice, and then experiencing my own learning and working with that cohort led me to diagnosis. It really wasn't an awakening, though. It wasn't anything traumatic for me. I really felt a sense of calm amongst the storm, like it's finally a set of guides that can show me what I need to be knowing in order to then what I have to do. Understanding that part of the difference in neurodivergence was crucial, but yeah, it's still with me. It's with me every day. It is part of my identity.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you had the ability to know about the different diagnoses at that point, because imagine a lot of people would have just felt very confused about, I've got the anxiety diagnosis and things aren't changing, and not had other options.
Yeah, for sure. And who do I go to? Where do I get these questions answered? And there's a whole lot of discussion around what and why, but there's not a lot of when and how we do all of these things. And I think that was really where I was getting to the edge of my seat, thinking I've really got to do something here. What is it? Who can I find that can support me with it? And I think that's really the root of my work now, is what I've learned and able to live with is able to be passed on.
Yeah, hopefully the people that you work with can have as difficult a journey as you did.
Yeah.
So what sort of challenges did you face in terms of the lifelong experience of ADHD?
The one that's still here, it's definitely a work in progress. It's something that's up front every day, is that emotional regulation, being able to manage in difficult situations or seemingly dangerous situations, how to tap into my strengths of resilience to be able to say, look, it's time to manage the emotion first before we display the behavior. I think it's important that if we're always looking at those outward displays, which are the behaviors, we're missing those inward emotions that really drive them. I've spent a lot of time working on my own emotional regulation. It has gotten me into strife socially, financially, even with the law. There are a few things where it's important to understand that the way I'm delivering it is possibly not the best way for them to be informed about my situation. So it comes into that really emotional communication, or that social emotional learning has been foundational. Another challenge really is balancing roles. I think having the want or the drive for novelty and seeking change and all of those sorts of things, that I've done lots of different jobs and different types of study and learning. But I think it's looking for that common ground through all of them, that transferable skill for me, which has really been that curiosity. So although they were challenges in another way, they were also strengths.
Yeah, and potentially challenges with not necessarily all internally driven, but due to the way that the environment is configured around us.
Square peg, round hole. I'm the square peg with those corners of the extra, but the hole just needs to be slightly widened for me to slip right in. It's that accessibility.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I've lost a few jobs due to emotional dysregulation.
In the moment, yes.
Yeah, and I think hopefully now there's greater awareness of what you were saying before, that the behaviors are not necessarily a problem in and of themselves. It may be that factors are contributing, that the workplace wasn't a good environment.
Yeah, often workplaces don't like the truth slapping them very hard, though. They don't like being told that possibly it's something they could shift that would make it easier for everybody. It's still a very deficit mind out there in terms of workplace environments.
Yeah, sadly. You're talking about how post-diagnosis you were able to lean into some of the strengths, and can you talk more to that in terms of some of the changes that have come post-diagnosis?
Yeah, I think it's really, the diagnosis was the turning point in giving me that sort of guide, albeit fairly pathological, and looking at a deficit model. It gave me what not to focus on or what not to grow so much. So what I've done is allowed myself to embrace more of that neuro-affirming strategy, a bit more play to my work, a little bit more personalized routines that really integrate the sensory input for me, creating environments that are right. I think really it's given me a sense of validation to then say, look, it's me, this is what it is, it's identity driven, it's as hereditary as height, it's those types of things. We are very much able to just be and take up the space that we can in the world, albeit differently. I think for me now, it's really just embracing that strength, that inner strength, or the sense of purpose, and aligning that to managing life in a better way.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm really keen to hear more about the personalized routines and how you inject novelty and play into work.
Yeah,
it's really fun. We'll ask a bit more about that in a bit.
Sure.
In terms of the ways that ADHD still affects you today, you mentioned the emotional regulation. Is there anything else that's still a challenge?
Organization is a massive part of that. I think it's about that executive functioning where I may not be as fully staffed in that smart brain as some others, but it's more around putting systems in place, building that resilience model as you go, and shaping little things that have massive impact. It's that ripple effect. I think organization for me, it can be as simple as losing things or leaving things behind. And there are very simple strategies for that. But then it can be as detrimental to my health as forgetting to drink or forgetting to go to the toilet. And so there are lots of things that can be slightly more challenging. But I think if you have a very sort of rigid routine that is flexed enough, I like to work on not the traditional 80-20 in marketing, but this 80-20 in that we've always got a chuck it bucket that we can throw stuff in. There's 80% of the time we're going to hit the nail on the head, but that other bucket is where it's okay to put some things in that didn't really go to plan, that you can lose your phone or your keys or lock yourself out of your practice as I did yesterday. Life does get in the way, and it's not to be too hard on yourself. I think that the changes post-diagnosis is affirming the fact that it's okay to be as I am. Let's find a path of least resistance for me to follow.
I like that. The chuck it bucket.
Yeah, definitely something that I like to use with the teams. They understand you can throw some of those things away.
Yeah. and you're allowed to swear on this podcast. So
yeah, because it definitely is for me a fuck it bucket. That's absolutely 100%. At the end of my day, there's a whole lot of things that just go in there. I use to-do lists, but it's now I do to-done lists where I write things, what I have done. It's more looking at achievement rather than ticking off tasks. Yeah.
Nice. And that probably leads into the strengths that you're leaning into. You talked about some of the things that you've been able to come up with and how you're able to support your clients now. Can you talk more about the strengths that you're seeing?
Yeah, the leaning in exceptional is a word I like because I like to think that I'm fairly awesome. But in other ways, our framework, which I'll introduce to you shortly, is adding that R to that word awesome. It's really rawsome. I think exceptional strengths for me are around observation and looking at other people, that deep-seated sort of empathy and understanding where I can gain a deeper insight and therefore make more meaningful change through therapeutic intervention. But for myself, I think the strength is really that creative problem solving daily, running private practice, studying in an accelerated postgraduate program, all of those sorts of things compound stresses along with all of the daily struggles. But it's more around that understanding, sharing what I know about myself and empathizing with others so that we have that common ground of connection.
Yeah, nice. So tell us about Rawsome.
Yeah, this is my baby in waiting. It's a component of an overall sort of philosophy that I run my practice with. Resilience is really what we talk about. It's real and wonderful resilience. But what raw really is about that real and wonderful life moment by moment. So this raw theme that comes through it is really that deep authenticity. The framework is really 7 components or 7 pillars. We like to use them as pillars of growth or areas of development rather than looking at them all as things that are a deficit. They go across relationships, so Rawsome itself, the acronym, relationships, adaptability, wellness, sensory processing, organization, mindfulness, and empowerment. Now, you'll notice the bookends of those relationships and empowerment. That's the ripple effect that we want to create. Deep understanding of self, connecting with others, and then empowering them to also make change. So we've tried to encapsulate it as best we can against the DSM-5 sort of criteria of divergence, all of the sort of sectors, comorbidities, etc. It's been a method that I've been shaping for some time through my work in schools in particular, in how do we really accessibly give something to children, but also maybe aging adults that also has everybody in the middle taken care of. It's accessible in the way that it says we're not awesome, we're rawsome. And I think that's really what we want to go with, that real upfront strength. So for me, it's about making classrooms more inclusive. It's about emotional regulation. We look at developing training manuals for health professionals, how we can make GP surgeries and practices, or the dentist, for example. We have a podiatrist in our multi-D practice who is neuroaffirming in that he has 15-minute pre-appointment, just looking at machinery, talking about what it's going to feel like, practicing on an orange, those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot we can do with psychoeducation with the professional field, but a lot for me has been about developing this framework for my daily process. It really is how I live my life. It's transformed what I do. It's made me become the success I'm able to, because it really speaks to my strength and then layers it with resilience.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds really holistic, and it's amazing to hear all the context that you're using it in. Yeah, because there's the spaces that you mentioned, especially the dentist. Went to the dentist on Monday, and the feeling part I always imagine to be uncomfortable, but other aspects of it as well, just the having a lot of noise in the waiting room and the TV playing and feeling very uncomfortable just even in the waiting process.
I think there's usually the news or something heightening or something sort of explosive you can't control. And it's very much the sensation of smells in a dentist. It can be very sterile. We make a point in our practice that when you enter, it actually feels like a home. You'll notice in my own space behind me that there are elements that make it feel less clinical. There are regulations. The podiatrist room can't obviously have as much of the luxury that I can. They have to be quite sterile, no pot plants and things. But the overall sense of our practice, people come in, it's very calming. There's multi-light strategy. We've got lots and lots of indoor plants, lots of natural light. And we purposely chose the building for that purpose. It's intentional. It's very important.
Amazing. It sounds like a sanctuary to go to.
Yeah. People say it's a cross between a sort of a boutique hotel and a bed and breakfast meets allied healthcare. And I think I like that allied healthcare is on the end. This is where you come and be comfortable and safe. You'll feel cared for. So it's that type of aspect.
Amazing. And for our listeners, whereabouts is the practice located?
So we're in Mount Gambier, so it's the limestone coast of South Australia. At the moment, we've got a beautiful 26 sunny day, but most of the time it's 4 seasons in a day. But yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world, quite regional, but very movers and shakers, particularly around innovation.
We'll know where to go to get that type of care. And the accelerated study, tell us about that.
So the accelerated study is a culmination of my life that has finally come to a head, that if I want any real credibility in the deficit world of looking at supporting people with mental health, I actually have to be a registered psychologist. So what I've tried to do is put that off as long as I can, because it's not in me to be this scientific model only. I'm very philosophical. But what I've done now is I've managed to build, as I said, my framework, but something that supports me actually through the system that wasn't supporting me at every other attempt. So things like journalism and education and disability services, all of those educational journeys were very challenging. They don't fit how I learned. I'm a very immersive learner, visual, verbal, like to use tactile sort of concrete materials to explain myself. So University Online just didn't fit that. And because I was regional and needed to access it, I really had to have a solid access plan. And as an adult with ADHD and at Swinburne, I do have an access plan. There are supports in place for me now, but my framework behind it, my subtle growing of resilience that says that, look, if I face something that's challenging, I can get around it. I've just actually got to figure out what skills I've got and employ those. It's a very quick process. It's 6 weeks of intensive learning. It's a certificate that sort of gets you into a diploma, and then you move on to your normal registration process with psychology. So I'm a good 18 months out. But for my history back, it's been very much counselling is my realm. And again, in education and my even earlier graphic design experience has pulled together everything I'm doing with my framework now.
Yeah, I love that. Because I guess some people might view the having multiple careers as a problem, but actually it allows us to come up with a really beautiful, intricate and holistic approach.
Because the model was always that you went to school and you did your learning and then you went to work and you did a little bit of extra learning, but you really were there just to maintain the status quo of your stability and in paying bills and living in society. But really, for me, it's been about how can I do all of that, but from a position of my deepest value of self, and that's being authentic to me, knowing that I'm kind and genuine and all of those sorts of things. But how do I portray that in a way that others really understand? And really my emotional regulation or lack of in my early years stopped people seeing the truth of me. And I think that masking ability to lie in the face of my own failures wasn't helping anybody. It ended up being that I have to own those and know that there are ways around it, and that saying sorry to myself was important. It's more than a word. It's really an action. You've said sorry now, get on. How can I change it for the future? So now at uni, it's a very different process. I can get through. I really know how to navigate the really bad bits, but I can also do the very good bits, and I'm achieving in that sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the accelerated approach would probably be good for me as well.
Otherwise, the slowness, boring. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think though I might have done research methods 1 as a bridge about 5 times in 3 different study courses, education, disability, and now research again. I'm a fairly good researcher now. I always think I might have done the hard yards, and you have to consider that going into a forest, as daunting as it is, you can only go halfway in and then you're actually coming out. So it's a matter of really speaking to the fact of getting past that comfort zone and pushing yourself into a bit of real fear, and then relaxing into your strengths and rolling with what you're capable of doing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Speaking of forests, I'm looking at the notes and I see you're into nature photography.
Yes.
Not working.
Yes. Yeah. I tend to think that photography really led me to everything that I do now. It's been this zooming out to grab the whole picture, but to understand everything, but then to zoom right in and look at that root cause. As deep as it is to the spurs underneath a mushroom, I got to the point of taking so many photos that I went from drone footage all the way into absolute macro. But I think that really captured lots of things, lots of symmetry in nature, lots of balance. And from my dyslexic thinking, it's very pattern seeking. There's a lot of beauty in color and shape. So it was not only dopamine releasing, but it was very executive function producing in the fact that it allowed me to excel at decoding and bringing together what I needed to remember. But also it created very strong episodic memory. And lots of the time in ADHD, that episodic memory, which is different to other memories in that it is attached to deep emotion, we are able to recall those a lot quicker than we are other memories for things that are stored in long-term or short-term memory. So for me, I wanted to really focus on creating raw moments in time. And that's really from a deep depression just before diagnosis of not really knowing where to go. Photography pointed me in a direction of really significant focus. It's now the logo for our business. It's very much the color scheme resonates with nature's flow of energy. A lot of it did come from just thinking about the real and wonderful aspect of what's right in front of you at the moment you've got it.
That's really interesting about the episodic memory. And would you say that taking the photos helps to actually ingrain some of the memories as well?
Yeah. So when you've taken it and then you view it, it's a second learning. We're looking at a lens, and often the one at the time I was living in Townsville, it was very tropical. And my partner, the podiatrist, was working at the hospital. So we essentially had to be there, and it's a big change. Moving towns every 2 years was a big challenge, all the way from Darwin and Tasmania and New Zealand and a whole lot of places. I think that capturing the moment, looking at it from the background first. In photography, you learn that it's always background first, that you check everything around it before the focus. And that's the way our world works, is that we're too busy looking at all of the things rather than the root cause. It can be quite reactive. For me, I started with macro and in it went, taking a photo, viewing it, sharing it, writing about it on social media, really imprinted the learning behind why I was doing it. They weren't just Instagrammable clickbait. They were very much a journal of my learning and seeking new purpose for the next 45 years of my life. So raw came out of that deepest, darkest part where you can't see any other light. It's that donkey in the well. For the listeners, donkey in the well is there's a donkey trapped in the bottom of the well, and all it can see is the lack of possibility in being able to. The farmer at the top was looking in and pining and worried that how do I get this donkey out? So in essence, they came up with the fact that it's just the end of the end. There's nothing we can do. But in fact, the farmer putting all of those spade loads of soil into that well, every spade level that went in on top of him, the donkey stood on. So as that kept going, the donkey got to the top of the well and out it came. So in amongst thinking that nothing is really able to happen, there is a deeper sense of let's just look at it from a perspective away from our emotions and reaction. I did it through a lens, but what really is there that we can shape and go forward? And there is a way around it. 9 times out of 10, you can't go round, over, under. You have to just go through it. It's like sitting with that just for a moment and pushing yourself on.
Like that. One interesting thing for myself was I used to take a lot of photos, and then I started to feel like I'm not actually in the moment. I would look at other people who they seem to whip out their phone camera as soon as they get to a beautiful site without appreciating it. But I've probably gone too far one way, because now I notice that I try and recall aspects of holidays that I've been on, and I can remember some parts, but having photos would actually be very helpful.
I think there's quite a bit of thought in that, and I went through that process of that Instagram is just facade. It's very fake. It's something that you can look through and there'll be a deeper, darker side, because we really only try to show the best parts of ourselves there. The difference was, for me, I took away the social aspect of it and really used it as a photo board to share my journey through visual because of that dyslexic thinking and the want to do it that way. But it was difficult. I used to find difficulty social media, people taking photos of food and really sensitive moments that are about their families or connection, and then they miss that realness of it. So I avoid taking those types of photographs. The intentional photographs of nature are ones that I know I'm going for purpose. What am I trying to photograph here? What aspect of the flower is the bit that I want to capture most, or is it something around it? If it's just color, you might not even know it's a flower, but it's just color. So I'm not taking away from the experience as such. I'm enhancing it by capturing it. Often I'll explore a garden first, and botanic gardens are my thing. My garden at home is very neat, and I love lots of ornate things. But for me, it's just indulgence. It's a candy store every day in spring, particularly now where we are. It's just perfect.
What type of plants do you have in the garden?
I'm not a big lover of color. That makes foliage is a big thing for me, more so than actual flowers. Flowers have a cycle. They're part of it. I do flowering plants, but for me, it's very much about the strength and the resilience that they have. So for me, my garden is shaped very differently in different parts because there are elements of the garden that are very sunlit. I call it the hot spot, which is where all the succulents and cactuses are. It's a bit that the dog doesn't like to walk around. But the other part is more lush and green and fern-like underneath the pergola, which is where the sun comes in and you can have your morning coffee. So it's very much an outdoor room. It has to ignite all of those passions in me.
Amazing. That sounds like a beautiful oasis.
Yeah.
Now, I also like foliage as well. I've got a lot of leafy greens that are growing and I'm loving watching them do well in the spring.
It's the front desk in the foyer, the reception is that they come in, there's a big amber vase. I have fascination with amber glass. It's the sun color, it's good energy. But there's something different in that vase every 2 weeks, and it's simply a branch off of a tree somewhere that's fallen, or it's something down the side of the practice that looks ornate or just catches my eye. I've had some clients tell me that you do realize you've got weeds in a vase. And I said, weeds and sticks and things all just look as beautiful depending on the perspective. It's a good talking point. We do use a lot of that biophilic sort of framework in our design.
And maybe it also speaks to the idea of, is it a weed or is it a pioneer plant? And also looking at ourselves.
Yeah, a bit like judging a fish as how well it can climb a tree, that type of thing.
Yeah. Right. So changing gears to productivity tips. I'm keen to hear how you optimize your productivity while you're working, but also while you're studying as well.
Yeah, lots of tactics out there that I had tried. There are hundreds of things. I think for me, simplicity is key. I don't have a very good time at remembering to put things in digitally. Having said that, I do use technology verbally, so that I use a lot of asking the device to do things for me. Mainly, I've deduced it to an approach that's within my resilience framework. And it's really just breaking everything down into the sort of the 3 M's. I can say it to a kid pretty quickly. I said, have you thought about your prioritizing? For me, the approach is really putting them into 3 groups. The first M is mandatory. They're those real things that you do every day that you must do. So that's get up and actually go to the toilet and eat and have food and look after yourself. That's that type of thing. There's the mundanity of life, which is that middle M, where everything is categorized into you have to do it. It may not be that fun, but you can do it. But it has to be done. That's like meeting the normal demands of life. But the sort of the essential part is getting enough of that third M, which is the meaningful aspect of life, where we really get our reward from. So what I've had to do to manage myself is not just tick away at everything that has to be done and then give myself a reward. I've broken my days, my hours, my tasks down into 3 very manageable equal parts so that we get this balance of reward for output. I also use stress as a currency. A lot of people would order in takeaway or spend their money as the currency of what it is to do. But for me, it's around using stress. If I'm going to have to put a lot of stress in, the outcome must be matched. So it's this really carefully structuring tasks in those mandatory, mundane, and meaningful groups. And then it really anchors you, sets you for a flow of the day, and then really allows you to grow at the other end of it with some success.
Could you give an example of some tasks that might fit into those categories?
Yeah, absolutely. So things like the mandatory for me are those everydayers. There's bills to pay, there's rent to meet. So there's a drive to be accountable that's already there. That's that real mandatory part of life, responsible for yourself. It might be if you're in school, it might be things that the mandatory is that you actually arrive at school. The challenges at school are different. But for me, daily, those mandatory ones, that literal thing to set your alarm clock to get up to meet your first client, because that's your breadwinning task. So the mundane in the day are those boring things, everything that I would not want to put my attention to. Like I might need to read 6 journal articles for the upcoming assignment, and I think they're just not on something I want to know about. So I keep avoiding those, but I know that they're actually that mundanity that has to go from A to B in order for me to keep succeeding. It can also be things like preparing food. For me, is really this mundane task. My partner, luckily, is obsessed with cooking and recipes and method and this outcome of magnificence. But for me, it just looks like a whole lot of method that my executive function is going to get confused with, that the kitchen is just going to be a big pile of mess and I'll never do the dishes after. Wasted the whole energy in doing this beautiful country cooked pie. I have to really consciously put those into my time frame, or I miss things like breakfast and lunch and I wouldn't cook dinner. So, and then the choices that you can buy are usually not as good or as individualized for your diet. So The meaningful tasks, though, for me are definitely walking. Walking for me is a double whammy. We get 2-for-1 deal, which I like for ADHD. Stack them and multiply them and do it all in, my grandmother used to say, kill a bird with, multiple birds with one stone, or whatever the saying is. But it's that 2 birds, 1 stone. It's that definite thing that the more we can do together of those meaningful ones, the better. So walking is exercise, but it's also, I choose the pines. We live in, as I said, the limestone coast. It's the green triangle of Australia. Loads and loads of forestry walking. We have a fairly large dog, so needing about 6 kilometers a day of exercise. And if I was to think about it in that capacity, I probably wouldn't start walking. But the thing is, I do know that it clears my mind. It bathes me in the moment of what's happening, whether it's rain or shine. There's nothing I can do but be present. So I think that really takes me away from that cloud or fog that we talk of having with ADHD. That can be quite depressing most of the time. And seasonal affective disorder was one of those things. But definitely walking is something that's got me through, in that I know I have to do it. It's a bit of a mundanity for exercise and health, but it's also very liberating and peaceful. So it's a good one. The other sorts of things, meaningful tasks, are to be creative. I have thrown a lot of time into my framework, which is dopamine releasing in itself, but it is work. So coming away from that, I'm trying to really focus on those deeper things I like, which is the gardening and the hobbies of art and craft, but also going to other artful events. There are things like, I went to the local symphony, I've been to Bangarra Dance recently, a few other things. So it's very much about finding how to get your dopamine so that it's not coming from chocolate, caffeine, sugar, alcohol, a whole array of other things. And I think meaningful tasks really do have to resonate with the individual.
Yeah, great framework, and I see how it would fit in.
Yeah.
I wanted to share the PETA approved version of the killing birds, which is feed 2 birds with 1 scone or scone.
There you go. Thank you. Because, I don't want to be non-PC, but, 95-year-old grandmother and her analogies have sat with me for so long.
Yeah, I think that generation enjoyed killing birds.
I think so. Blackbirds, though, I have to say, where does Peter stand on blackbirds and my pot plants? No.
Put them in a pie.
That's it, 20, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good way of structuring your days. Do you also potentially structure your week in that way?
I sometimes structure a task that way. So it can be as minute as, right, it's shower time, but I'm super tired, but I need one today. So breaking that task down would be, the mandatory is you have to use soap when you go in. It's a shower. You have to wash yourself, right? But the whole mundanity of it is that you've got to wait for the hot water to come from supposedly as far away as China is from Australia. And I'm standing there cold and just so sensory overloaded that I just want it to pass. But you've got to do those things. But the meaningfulness of that shower is really that once I'm there and I'm comfortable enough, I focus on the water coming down over my body. I think about the sensory experience of that warmth. If you've got a shower that wets you enough, some hotels don't. But it's important that I also have a chalk texter with me in there that I write on the shower screen, brain dumping, because I've got the most amount of sanity, space, comfort, and alone time in the shower, other than it's the toilet. So I figure if I'm in the shower and write my lists, I often write messages to myself. You've got this. It's going to be a pretty shitty day, but you can do it. It's about building spaces. Home is really a sanctuary. Yes, it isn't meant to be a trend-setting environment. I think the best trend to follow is everything that is you. And so if in your home you have Post-it notes on your fridge and you've got chalk texters on your shower screen and there's labelled bins, even though only 2 of you live in the home, it's important that those things are in place, or the rest of my day just doesn't function as it should. So that mandatory, mundane and meaningful, or the anchor and flow and grow, which I say with kids, really is usable across small scale to big scale project or challenge.
That's such a great life hack. I had someone else talk about having a waterproof paper in the shower.
It's like I used to have them as a bubble bath. Mum would give us those, coloured texture soap things to draw on the tiles, and I always loved them. I think, where the hell did they go? I might be an adult, but I still like the sensory part of drawing a flower on the shower screen when I'm supposedly meant to be washing. But as long as you do all of those steps, it doesn't matter how you do it. And I often think that common third analogy is really easy to work with. 3 is a really nice number.
Yeah, I'm going to go out and buy one of those, because often The reason why I end my shower early is because I've just had 3 ideas and I don't
You
want
gotta
to
write
lose
it
the
down.
thoughts.
Yeah. So then I started trying to record it, and then you got Siri, the shower noise, set Siri off, and then your phone. In the end, I thought it's just a chalk text. The thing is, when you finish your shower, you've done your drying, you even go and get dressed. I often come back in and then take a photograph with my phone. So it records what I've tried to generate with ideas. It's a good way for doing it for uni. It's a good way for outing how you might socially speak to somebody at your next event. I even did it this morning about today's YouTube. This is something that you're on display. So I had to say to myself, hey, you got this, James. You're talking about stuff and you've done it before. It's nothing, but I'm writing it down. So it's giving me that extra extrinsic learning at the same time.
I love it. Thanks so much for sharing that.
That's all right.
And it speaks to something you mentioned earlier as well, in terms of injecting novelty and play into your tasks as well.
Do everything gamified. I mean, my partner and I can say, right, we're sitting, it's 8:30. We've had a great dinner, obviously, because he cooks it. But we're sitting on the recliners now, and it's starting, we're thinking, oh, are we going to watch another one of those? Are we going to watch another Walking Dead is something that we're right into at the moment. But if we're going to watch another one of those, but I say we've got dishes to do. We've got to lead out of today so that we can lead in tomorrow with the clean slate. So we never really want to do it, but we egg each other on and say, we're going to do a 15-minute timer on our watch. We're going to put our own headphones on or AirPods in, select our own motivated music or a podcast or something. And then we got a 15-minute time frame to split those tasks into 2 people. So we're body doubling, we're motivating with music, we're canceling out distraction, we're gamifying it for novelty, and we actually get the task done. So it's really a simple process. What I've got another approach I use a lot is the stop process, where we sense and then we think and then we look at our options and then we proceed. But that sensing is the thing that you really have to stop. Yes, I'm really comfortable and I could just go to bed now with a full stomach and not have done that and not gone to the toilet and wake at 2:00 and not put the dog out. And that's all that routine. But if you can gamify it and encourage each other to do it, I've even done it as small as I'm going to make my espresso coffee in the machine by the time the toaster is popped. That gives me an encouragement just to make breakfast. There's a lot of things you have to really encourage yourself to do. We're fighting with that a lot in ADHD. Initiating tasks is a damning thing.
I like that, because I've heard of injecting creativity, curiosity, and competition into it. And I always wondered, how do you make competition into something that's healthy? But that idea of competing against the 15-minute timer or the espresso brewing.
Yeah, so it's not a really competition. Schools are very good with competitiveness. We are obviously putting things up against standards, and and even in workplaces, it's about employee of the year and how many sales quota and all of those KPIs. But really inside it, it should be this, we say to kids all the time, the real positive of learning is the learning, or the best part of it is that you've learned something. Kids don't really attract to that. It's more around, for me, I use rewards, which is different to rewards, obviously, but rewards are those real intrinsic things that are related to them. And often they have a choice as to what those rewards can be. So gamifying everything means I have kids that every kid that comes to me has a tiny little hole punch card, and they know that it's a bit like coffees, but when they get to their 10th session, they know that they can choose the reward. One 17-year-old chose to sit and have a coffee with me in the sun out the front as the reward of getting to a point. Little kids might want a special fidget that they can't necessarily get on their own. So there's lots and lots of things, but it's that intrinsic link between what's in it for them. Otherwise, we won't get anywhere. We don't learn from things we don't like. So it's about gamifying it and making it positive, knowing that it's difficult to do. Life is just life. You get one spin. So give it your best.
Yeah. In terms of, you said you've tried a lot of things. What are some things that you've tried that maybe a lot of conventional people would say would work for productivity that doesn't?
I think a lot of it's usually verbal. I think there's that stigma attached, or their assumption, their bias, their implicit bias as to what they think I'm struggling with. They assume they can sympathize probably more than empathize. But it's often I'll get that, just try a little harder, or have you tried focusing, or is it have you just slow down a little bit, just slow down a little bit. It's that little bit of just that they think we've not got. I think what's important to point out that neurodivergence in itself isn't short on effort. What they're short on is the way to get effort to equal the outcome. for me, just giving it a go or just get in there or pick it up and have a look, those sorts of things I do. But more often than not, that's where anxiety starts to be fueled. I much prefer know what's coming. I'm not a big one for surprises or shifts in schedule. However, I'm a great shifter of schedules. But I think it's about knowing that and understanding that there are people out there that just don't have the information. They're not necessarily trying to flippantly excuse it. They just don't necessarily have the know-how on how to discuss it with somebody that has possibly the best experience in the world because it's their own. So this element of lived experience linking with my professional now is really that I can challenge that unproductive help that people try to give. So I think knowing more about yourself and knowing how to answer is probably a really good skill in the face of that unhelpful productivity advice that we're given.
Absolutely. You mentioned effort. I'm exhausted after all of these amazing conversations, so we're going to take a short break.
Hi there, Focus and Chillers. Are you ready to supercharge your knowledge in the realms of creativity, tech, and psychology? Come check out my fortnightly newsletter. In each edition, you'll get quick wins and actionable takeaways that you can put into practice right away. If this sounds like you, I'd love to have you as a reader. Subscribe for your fortnightly dose of insights. The link is in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show.
Right, we're back from our break. We've had some water, and now we heard you talk about setting up the evening in terms of making sure the dishes are done and things like that. What do you do in the morning to set up for a great day?
Yeah, it's that shower. It's that. Yeah. I get out of bed, and I think, and if we look briefly to the science of it, it's that definite change in nervous system. Temperature of the shower is important, not too hot, not too cold. But it's really much about, all I have to really worry about is just standing up and going into the shower. There's no anxiety to the day. I do struggle. My partner is a bit the opposite. It's very much up straight away. Alarm's gone off and it's precise and it's turned off and it's up. But for me, it's 6 snoozes and a roll over and do a bit of exercise before even leaving the bed. I do take a good 15 minutes to exit the bed. And I think my strategy has been reduced to 1-time snooze at 9 minutes, knowing that I've got a second one to hit 20 past. It's usually 20 past 6, but it's pretty much I'm in the shower by 6:30 because I have to be starting work at 9. I like to be in at work an hour early to lead in. So I think you just work your way back and you create that. But the morning is definitely a shower. It's a cup of coffee because that's a quick dopamine hit. It gives me a bit of power in the mornings. But also it's that walk with the dog, that 30 minutes before work to clear your head and lead into all of your critical thinking for the day so that you're not overwhelmed before you hit work. They're the really simple steps of my day. It's an intentional flow. It's this calm and clarity, or a way that I can carry myself forward without too much stress.
And that actually sounds nice, waking up over 15 minutes.
Yeah, don't be pressured to just up and go. Yeah. Having said that, ADHD works well under pressure. In emergency in the night, I'm there. But the difficulty is we can't live in that momentum all of the time. We have to suppress some of that in order to give us some energy to then grow further.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how about on the other side, getting to bed?
Rumination, loads and loads of thoughts of the day. Did I look this way? Did I do that? Did I offend them? It's rejection sensitive. It's all of those things at night. The difficulty with the brain is it's very hard to switch it off when you're sleeping. So trying to pull resilience reserves or utilize emotional well-being strategies you can't do while you're sleeping. So for me, it's to lead into that first. And again, it's a lead into that moment is to really get you into a comfortable place. Is the temperature right? Are all of the senses covered? Is the place right for rest? And if it isn't, there's a dog scratching on the floor or licking or something that's probably not right. Or if there's a smell you can smell but can't quite pinpoint it, that might be a problem. So it's best to make the environment first of all. But for me, it really is about a thought process, telling yourself that it is now time to turn off. It's a visual sort of statement that you view in your mind. You can visualize it or imagine it. But it's not like you're counting sheep, but it's this intentional thought process to tell your body that now is the time for rest. So one important thing is that charging your phone out. I've gone back to investing in one of those digital alarm clocks from the 90s I hated. That used to get me up for high school every morning, and that sound is still a little sort of shrieky with terrorist trauma. Mostly, it's a really good starter. It's that snooze for 9 minutes. It isn't Siri. There's no preempting of my day by technology or somebody thinking I need the latest deal on Temu, of which I despise. Or it's all of those sorts of things. I don't need that interruption when I'm going to sleep, but I also don't need it when I'm getting up. because those two sides of that need to be tread very carefully, because it makes my day either successful or not.
Yep, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And I do miss the phone weekends. Sometimes you think, oh, it's so warm in bed in winter and you don't want to get out and you get your phone and things. But I think intentionally changing environments for purpose is really important. When you're eating, you're just eating. Don't eat in the bed sitting where you sleep, where you view, where you game, where you study, where you work, because you don't actually have a sense of purpose of environment. That whole motivation part is missing. If you're in an environment conducive of best work, you'll work better. Comfort is important, but it doesn't mean comfort zone. We have to make sure that we are pushing those comfort zone boundaries, or we end up with this stagnate, fixed mindset that doesn't really help us in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Now, if people want to connect with you online, where's the best place?
Look, the website's being built. If there's anyone out there that's a great web designer that wants to get on board and do some assistance with this, that would be great. But it is currently being built. I think the best way to do it is through LinkedIn or social platforms. Just look for Raw Life Health. LinkedIn is where you'll find more about myself, but particularly around the research that goes into my frameworks or my methods. But yeah, and also Mount Gambier, if you're down here, come and say hi. We do have an espresso machine.
Wonderful. We'll include those links in the show notes as well.
Cool.
And do you have any final words or asks for the audience?
If it was an ask, I think it would be that just to really keep shit real. It's about, for us, it's that real and wonderful life, but it's really keeping shit real and sharing your wonder through that. Understanding that you're able to take up space. You are due a place in the world and you have something to give and it's deserved to be shown. I think along with that comes embracing the strengths first. If you're really good at something, hyper focus on it if you have to, but really use that to shape where you transfer your skills. It's that keeping it real and sharing your wonder.
Amazing. Thanks so much, James. We'll wrap the show with that. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.